This is the first in our series of R&D Labyrinths. My name is Ava, and I'm part of the Arts Technologies team at Serpentine. We are home to the R&D platform and the Creative AI Lab. And I am joined today by the very curious and effervescent Orb, who will be lighting our path along the way. Hello, Orb.
Hello, Ava.
Are you ready to go on this adventure with me?
I'm so ready.
All of the artists?
I'm really happy we can hear you.
Yeah, well, I'm glad we got to test.
Technology's a pain.
It is. But you know what? What we're trying to do here is much harder than it looks, and I'm glad we're trying it anyway. So I think that we should just get started. We should basically use you like Daedalus, and in these episodes, you will light our way as we navigate these sort of key technological and operational infrastructures behind three artists' work. So the plan is that first, we'll transcend the blank page, learning to write with artist and writer Rindon Johnson's poetry bot D'Artagnan. Next, we will battle the high hedges of hierarchical funding models with Cygnet, a new consensus-building interface made by the decentralized autonomous organization Black Swan, and who's represented here today by writer and critic Penny Rafferty. And then finally, we will venture around the sharp corners of automated creativity to find Gradient, a new tool for collaborative music composition by software designer Ricardo Saavedra. The R&D Labyrinths are made in collaboration with Trust, a collective project for the R&D and maintenance of shared infrastructure and imaginaries. This has really been a pandemic collaboration and so long in the making. It came from a need in the Creative AI Lab just to show how artists were using back-end interfaces when they worked with machine learning. And since we've been working on this project for so long, we decided to expand it to include the blockchain lab run by Ruth Catlow, who heads Furtherfield's decentralized arts lab. And future episodes will open even wider. A couple of bits of preparation. Please add comments and questions into the chat. If you don't see a chat interface, that means that you're probably not logged in, but it's free to make an account. And you'll need to do that if you want to participate in the Q&A at the end with the artists. So I'd also like to thank Louisa and Ali, who are doing live open captions for us this evening. And I think let's get started. Let's follow the artist. Come on, Orb.
Let's go.
Basically, there's this guy, Markov. Here, let me see if I can find my notes.
My name is Rindon Johnson. I'm an artist and a writer. I deal a lot with poetry and with sculpture and the three-dimensionality of language. No, it doesn't, but I think I need to make one up now. The interface that I'm going to talk about today is called D'Artagnan. It's a poetry generator that my little sibling made for me. Run. You return a headset on to make myself all the sun sculptures. The devil hindered Noah's work. How even dismisses it, like I apply a chocolate and they come, true radical makes me, and in borders. His skin started to entertain, is so here installed the whole, with metal brown hide in our planet. In overlay, envelope me, if any birthmarks are useless to see you. That was I like that one. That's a good one. There's a perception that people write from a blank page or a blank Word document and then start writing. I don't think language comes from an empty space. It's a social thing, because it's how we communicate with one another, and it helps construct our social understandings. So the idea that you could write something that's relevant to other people from a blank slate it's preposterous. The way that I started writing was often by listening, and I would kind of just wait around until someone said something that I thought was awesome or interesting. The way that D'Artagnan works is actually really similar because so much of it is about what sounds good and what happens to kind of tickle my ear. The key thing that you have to make sure that you're doing is that you're calling to a particular text that you already have that exists. We're calling to a manuscript that I've already written, and now we're just going to press click, and it's going to start showing me different manifestations of that same manuscript in a particular chunk of information. I wanted to make my own language generation tool because I needed a way to mimic my usual writing practice on demand. D'Artagnan uses a series of different off-the-shelf things to function. It's employed through something called processing, which is basically a software that is often used for running and visualizing JavaScript. It uses something called Rita, a toolkit created by someone called Daniel Howe. Basically, it allows for someone to create their own computational language generators. It has a lot of those grammatical rules, it has syntax, etc. I think it's important to see technology as something that can be repurposed because nothing is fixed. And so if we can look at technology as a space where things are malleable and things are changeable, it means that we won't get stuck. Now that we've got it up and running, let's look at ways that we can change it. So let's see. We want to change the way that the words are putting themselves together and how much of the original manuscript is going to be called to in our generation. So we're going to change this thing called the temperature. Right now it's at 0.9. Let's change it to 0.5 and see what happens. Press run. And so you can see that now with a different temperature, the language looks completely different. And so it goes from being, with our temperature at 0.5, this line, which is almost complete from the manuscript, in one particular scarring ritual, the young men become, and then that's original, and then it chooses a whole new noun for the men to become. In this circumstance, it's chosen the car. But with our temperature at 0.9, things are way crazier. So it's like, men seem to crawl into holes in the kitchen. I didn't write that. One day, she caught an entire lizard. I did write an entire lizard, but I didn't write one day she caught an entire lizard. Okay. Oh, good, they're calling me. Okay, I'm gonna answer. My sibling made this, so it's better if they talk about it. The orb has a question about temperature.
So the temperature is what determines how randomized the text is. So it is basically thinking about how much logic do you want to have, and it's on a scale from 0 to 1. So 1 is like super crazy, whereas 0 is really rigid. So we put it at a 0.7 for now, so that way it's actually just trying to pull from a more stabilized randomizer, if that makes sense. Like the temperature will basically tell you, oh, okay, how much do you care about the parts of speech and the order that they come in? Like when you're talking about grammar, you're talking about temperature.
Right. Temperature is grammar.
Whereas
grammar is temperature.
Exactly.
And grammar is
the number of words that you're pulling at a given time.
I think grammar builds worlds in that if you create a set of rules and you say, these are the rules that we are going to follow as we go through our day-to-day life, then you construct a particular type of reality, right? And if you say, I want different rules, or I want a different reality, then you could maybe make something new. Behind Rita are Markov chains, which are a way to statistically model random processes. In the case of D'Artagnan, it's looking at a series of words or a single word. A good way to think about a Markov chain might be to think about it in relation to the weather. So you collect a whole bunch of data on sunny days and cloudy days. The Markov chain essentially allows you to take the probability of the future by looking at the present. Let's say that today is a rainy day. According to my model, it's more likely that tomorrow will be a rainy day, but it's not impossible that tomorrow could be a sunny day. I mean, honestly, it would be funny if I just did nothing. There was fake rain. I'm just like, it's a rainy day. I mean, I suppose I understand language as an infrastructure in that it's a form of culture. It can hold our cultures inside of itself. So the language that you speak is also the world that you come from. Sometimes I put stuff in D'Artagnan that I don't like, that I disagree with, or that makes me feel shitty. And I see if maybe in that rearranging that there's something more. There are so many lines of continuation that I see between blackness and language. Blackness is a construct, and language is a construct. I am very aware of how dangerous it is. At the same time, I do find myself desperately searching for ways to, like I do with D'Artagnan, to kind of eat it up and spit it out in a new way. And so in this way, I feel like it is a very necessary exercise as a Black person, especially from the United States, to suggest that there are many ways to be Black and there are many ways to speak. And with the poetry machine, it's kind of just like, okay, give me more ways, give me more possibilities, more options.
What we do is we give it a degree of randomness. So this is called the n-gram, which is what kind of determines the number of words that you want to pull at a given point. So what I mean by that is, like, do you want to deconstruct the text so you're only grabbing word for word? Or do you want to deconstruct the text so you're grabbing 3 words at a time, or you're grabbing a whole, 10 words or a phrase at a time? So that tells you the level of randomness that the sentence will become. So if you have a really high n-gram, which would be anything kind of bigger than 3, then you're basically saying, hey, just pull phrases. Whereas if you have a low n-gram of 1, you're saying just pull a single word at a time.
Rita and my poetry machine, D'Artagnan, allow me to work with language in a social way. I can use YouTube, or I can use Twitch, and I can take the language from a transcript or from a conversation and see if something in there might work as a line of poetry.
That was really fab. I already can see some chats and comments in the Twitch interface, which I know you can't see. But I'm going to ask you a question, actually. I really just want to know about what a session with D'Artagnan is like. So do you decide to write with D'Artagnan, or do you pull it up every day? I mean, do you still use a notebook? Tell me a little bit about what your new process of writing is with your new software interface.
Well, it depends. It depends on what I'm trying to write. Like right now, I'm trying to write a sci-fi novel, and so I'm taking a lot of science fiction that I like or dislike and throwing it in D'Artagnan to help me better construct my deep point of view for my characters, or better describe the reality or not describe the reality. So I've been taking a lot of Philip K. Dick because he drives me crazy. And mostly I've been working with Galactic Pot Healer. That piece, that novel.
Amazing.
It's fascinating. I don't know. It really, D'Artagnan speeds up the process. So when I do sit down to write, D'Artagnan is usually the first thing that I pull up just to kind of loosen things up.
Amazing. So I think that was a great build-up for our next adventure. I hope the orb is going to join me as we head to another maze.
My name is Laura.
I'm Calum.
I'm Penny.
And we're Black Swan. Wow, amazing.
Black Swan is a collective of artists, technologists, researchers. The interface that we're going to talk about today is Cygnet.
Which is an app to enable communities of artists to decide how to distribute funds.
Cygnet means baby swan, and it's the baby of Black Swan. Cygnet wants to pervert the mechanisms through which decision-making occurs and create a system that works for artists to make radical decisions to organize together.
Institutions, curators, collectors, people who have the ability to decide how funding is used have power in the art world. With Cygnet, we're trying to put power back into the hands of artists and creative practitioners.
The current system where institutions are gatekeepers is a system that pushes risk onto the fringes and onto artists themselves. We do not want to create a new gatekeepers, but we want to provide artists with the keys to open these doors and reorganize the artwork internally in ways that fits to their needs. Cygnet is a tool that targets existing communities of creative practitioners, people that are already organized around shared spaces, shared studios, and often have shared practices.
What happens when artists are able to decide how funding is used? What happens when artists are in dialogue with each other about the distribution of resources, and actually, instead of making proposals for some anonymous and abstracted funding organization or open call, they're making proposals for each other.
You're actually reading the proposals of your peers, which means that you could offer a skill share or skill swap.
To be involved in each other's art practices, we develop a form of interdependence. It's a form of solidarity. It's where artists are actually working together to exist in the world rather than competing against each other for increasingly limited resources.
Here we are looking at the landing page, the opening interface for Cygnet, and here I can log in with my account and I can see the different cycles within which I can submit proposals. A proposal is an idea for a project to be developed, either individually or collectively.
Every new proposal cycle will begin on the new moon and the result comes on the full moon, which you can actually see with this icon here. The new, which is when you're setting your intention, laying the ground, bringing the ideas into the cosmos, into your community.
I click to go to the proposal submission form, which is a really open field, and yeah, we're all gonna have to enter some proposals.
Let's do it.
Let's do
Let's
it.
think about it. My proposal is that we collaborate on a new feature for Cygnet that allows for more funds to be funneled into the system.
Oh shit, I'm opening Zoom, sorry.
It's starting a Zoom meeting.
I cannot give my proposal without the Zoom account. So my proposal is actually about speculative world crafting game. And the proposal is to create a set of cards of alternative world models.
So I'm gonna submit my proposal. I'm just looking for a good time at the moment. I've had enough with lockdowns in this past year, and I really just want to eat vegan pizza outside with my friends. So I'm just gonna draw a big slice of vegan pizza in the proposal form. And then once I've finished my little drawing, I click submit and it's in.
New technologies such as blockchains and decentralized autonomous organizations have shifted the focus on the ways in which we organize. Blockchains make possible DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations. These are organizations that are run by their members and in which some of the decisions are automated through software. What's interesting about DAOs versus the traditional co-op model is the translocal dimension, the fact that they can empower collaboration across borders and facilitate decision making for collectives that are not necessarily located in the same geographical area. As organizations without a central authority, DAOs require their members to vote. In order to express a vote on a blockchain, one needs to pay a transaction fee that can get quite expensive. So what Cygnet does is takes the mechanisms of DAOs and currently tries them out without the need to pay money each time you vote. Given all these trade-offs, so far we have applied blockchain thinking rather than relying on the technology itself. So this is the voting interface, and I can see all the projects. Each of us has 100 voice credits, and we can allocate them across different projects. I would prefer to allocate 20 to everything is important, and then share the remaining 30 between the pizza party and the speculative world building, world crafting.
Very diplomatic.
This is a nice thing about multi-voting, is that you can reallocate your votes until you're ready to submit. And now I think I am. Cygnet is based on the mechanisms of quadratic voting. It provides a more granular way for people to signal the kinds of proposals that they feel very aligned to, that they really want to support. Here I have my 100 voice credits, and I could decide to allocate them all towards one single proposal, which means that my effective vote will be 10. Alternatively, I could decide to allocate my 100 voice credits across 4 proposals, so 25, 25, 25, 25. And that means that the effective vote that I contribute is going to be of 20.
The thing about voice credits is they don't translate directly into votes. Behind the scenes, we have a quadratic function or a square root.
Expressing higher preferences costs exponentially more.
The Cygnet interface is trying to make the relationship between voice credits and votes clear and visible. Here I can see this energy ring, which is showing the intensity of my vote.
At the moment, we are researching alternative funding structures and alternative economies for the arts. Cygnet aims to leverage some of the mechanisms and platforms that have emerged thanks to blockchains and smart contracts, particularly in the field of decentralized finance. Entities such as cultural institutions or individuals can stake their funds into a common pool. This pool generates interest that then is up to artists to decide how to use. Interest in decentralized finance comes from the high demand for some of these tokens, particularly stable coins. There's plenty of individuals in the crypto market that are willing to pay a high interest in order to borrow this asset. Lending them in a pool becomes very lucrative and can generate a very high interest. Cygnet makes it easy for people to donate their interest to fund artistic projects.
It's now the full moon, and all the other participants have submitted their votes, and we're going to find out what the winning proposal is. Are you ready?
Exciting.
3, 2, 1.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Actually, it's fairly even. Which I think also shows that the community is obviously fairly aligned, because the proposals had interest for quite a lot of people.
We do not want to create a new gatekeepers, but we want to provide artists with the keys to open these doors and reorganize the artwork internally in ways that fits to their needs.
Yay! Penny, that was your first time seeing the episode. So I hope you liked it. I know that you and Black Swan have kind of been really accelerating the development of this interface over the last couple of months. And I'm sure there are lots of artists in the audience who would be interested in joining and want to know more about that. But before we get to that, I have a question that has more to do with the time scale. So you mentioned the lunar cycle, and I'm curious, what if an artist or a collective group want to propose a project that's going to take years and not just a moon cycle?
Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you, yeah.
Super. So, I mean, the way in which a decentralized autonomous organization works is that it's also malleable. So, as much as we said originally this idea that it works on a lunar cycle for proposal-based making, which was also another part of us trying to think differently about funding and the alliance of funding. So, to remove a specific timescale as like more kind of an economic time of like Monday to Friday, and instead also thinking about like the lunar cycle, you always know there's going to be another new moon. So it also reduces that idea of the kind of one chance, and also to realign perhaps who we are as practitioners alongside the proxy of technology and the world at large. And within this also means that because it's a decentralized autonomous organization, that through voting mechanics, so not only putting in proposals, but you could also propose to change the mechanics. So for example, if your community, one person decided that actually they would prefer to do like 6 short-term project grants and 3, let's say 1 to 2 year project grants, you could actually submit a vote in the same way that we just demonstrated with Cygnet about actually changing the model. Because a lot of what we're trying to do with Black Swan is to understand that funding mechanics should be mutable. Like art is changing all the time. The art that we're seeing today was not the art that we saw 50 years ago, and it has different needs. And this is also part and parcel of challenging those more kind of archaic genre-based practices and funding models, which also not only reduce a certain amount of artistic practices being able to be made, but they also come along with all of the rather unsavory histories of either gender, nationality, race bias. So this is also part and parcel of Black Swan, is that actually it molds around the user on like a consistent basis. So it's actually always growing alongside the needs. So whether that's short-term, long-term, and so forth.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, I can't wait to see all the different kinds of projects and infrastructures that get built using Cygnet. So I think from consensus building through multi-voting, we are going to move to the next maze where we're going to go from automation to augmentation using reinforcement learning. So on to the next maze.
So the idea with gradient was to... Thank you. It's really collaborative. My name is Ricardo Saavedra, and I'm a software designer primarily. My practice explores new relationships between humans and technology. I'm also a musician, and in the past I've designed tools and software for music and expression. My interface is called Gradient, and it's a software that enables musicians and artists to work with machine learning in a very collaborative and transparent way. Automation is perhaps how the industry is treating machine learning. For me, to explore the question of augmentation is really to show a different perspective and to show how it's possible to improve certain tasks, but the human is still in responsibility of the actions, of decisions. Tools for machine learning are usually designed to automate music generation, but the music is often quite generic, and it is basically a generalization of the training data. They very rarely let you train your own model or let you see what the model is doing. They're still based on this black box model, right? So you train something and you're letting composers and artists to give an input and get an output, but you don't really know why you're giving that output or how do you get the model to generate something like that. These technologies are really good at creating, music like anything we've heard before, but not really great at generating anything that is on the experimental side or something that is more stylistically unique. So the first screen you would see once you start a new project is this screen, which will invite you to import your files. You now have this file as a particular seed that you can start to either modulate or you can alter further. And as you import them, Gradient will generate then a graphic representation of how these instruments and events relate to one another. You can have these ideas that are unfinished, bring them into Gradient and generate more material. So Gradient is trying to help you complete ideas that you already have with your own sonic palette, with your own training data. If you know that you want to develop an idea now in which the piano that is doing the bass sound is doing shorter notes, for example. So you would change that particular note to have shorter notes, so you change the outer ring. So by doing this, all the notes within that channel are shortening. But if you also want to connect this particular instrument to another instrument, and if you want to see how that sounds, you just make a connection between them. So now I'm just connecting the output of the first seed with the second. I don't really know what's going to happen, so we have to play to see. Through the note graph, you can see that that particular recipe creates that kind of music. If you liked what you heard, you can use that particular recipe to recreate or to apply to different things in the future. The way I define machine learning is perhaps in contrast to regular programming practices. In programming, you try to define the problem through a set of either equations or formulas or functions. And in machine learning, you're really finding algorithms that can learn by themselves and they can abstract on a particular input. In Gradient, right now I'm exploring a few techniques, reinforcement learning and hidden Markov chain models. So reinforcement learning is based on reward and punishment. There's a really good example by Pham in which he used reinforcement learning in the 70s to create these strange creatures that learn how to walk by themselves. In any application of reinforcement learning, this agent really needs to have some type of feedback looping which either gets rewarded or punished. The interesting thing about reinforcement learning for music applications is that you don't need training data. So we will learn from you what kinds of outputs you are more interested in hearing. It's always changing regarding this particular reward. So the problem that I was really trying to solve with Gradient was how to create a tool that could point to a new direction in machine learning. So instead of the black box model generating things for you, it could be a part of your creating process. And so I'm really interested in exploring this collaboration. So creating a tool from which you can compose with. The question of augmentation is really to try to create systems that do make these tasks easier, but the human is still in responsibility of the actions, of decisions. Because there are questions that should never be automated. Around machine learning and around human-computer interaction, there's an obsession with automation. I feel trying to find a way in which we are able to build a vision around machine learning that is different. That is really what's exciting to me nowadays.
So this is one of the first, or it is the first prototype video we made for the R&D Labyrinth, so it has a really special place in my heart. It feels like we made it years ago. But anyway, Ricardo, I have a question for you before we open it up for the audience. I'm kind of interested in, since you've made Gradient, how you think it's sort of shaping your creative production or its implications in shaping other people's creative production. I mean, what is it that is special about machine learning, or I guess for that matter, deep learning, and why is that specifically interesting to you?
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for your question. I think I'm not very excited about the things that are coming out from the R&Ds, from the AI R&Ds like OpenAI or or the like. Mostly because I think it is pretty much expected that these models will continue to get better, and they will. We will eventually get more training data. We will find to gather more computing power. So I'm much more excited about the interactive machine learning side, and because it is really a challenge in pairing our cognitive processes, how our brains work, and how we do collaborate, write, and achieve whatever we're trying to do, to how statistical inference and these algorithms work. But it is a very challenge, and I think what changed from the video that we recorded, which was almost a year ago, to now, the augmentation idea, the vision that AI is augmentation instead of automation, is gaining more traction, which I find really exciting. But at the same time, there's still a lot of challenges, and a lot of softwares that claim to be augmenting, they're still not doing that. They're far from doing that. And I think with Gradient, I was really able to see that something can only augment you if you're able to understand how it works. So there's a difference between, I think, your mind has to wrap itself around a particular tool or software tool so that it can outsource or externalize different cognitive processes, so that that tool becomes part of you as much as you're part of that tool. And I think Gradient was really an attempt to do that, to build that symbolic language between how machine learning works and how we work. And we're far from doing that. But I believe that that's the future. And I think back in the 60s, computers were only calculating machines. They're only seen as such. And it took computer scientists to ask the question, can computers be a little more than calculating machines? And of course, we know the answer to that question. And I think with machine learning, we're at a very similar turning point. Can these tools augment us in our creative processes? And I think the answer is yes, but we have to be really intentional in figuring out how.
Thank you so much, Ricardo. So what did you folks think about these videos? Do you have questions for the artists? I'm going to invite my friend, the Orb.
Hello. Thank you so much for sharing, everybody, leading us through your labyrinths. We had a question from K of Ghost going back to Rin's video, and I had long conversations with Rin as the Orb in all these videos. I know all the participants quite well, and I know that naming is something that comes up a lot in Rin's work, and I'm wondering where the word D'Artagnan comes from and what drew you to it, and maybe more generally how you think about naming in relation to your work and what role it plays.
Yeah, I mean, naming's a big part of my work. Sometimes I think it might be all my work is. But I came up with the name D'Artagnan because, first of all, amazingly nice to say. Second of all, it's related to the Three Musketeers, which is its own, that's its own spiral that we can talk about. But I just like the idea that there was a camaraderie or maybe a triangulation happening between like the text and myself and the program itself. And so noting that triangle through the Three Musketeers felt like a nice thing. Yeah.
Thanks.
We have another question by Viva Nova. It must be asked, I think this one's to Penny, would you consider using NFTs as a form of non-monetary exchange within the community?
Thanks for the question. I mean, I guess non-monetary exchange for NFTs, I assume that in a way this is potentially leading to an exchange of artworks and contracts that are not monetary binded.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
I think that if, for example, there was an interest in doing that from the artist, and that could also very much sit within like a proposal, I think that then, of course, that would be very much possible. What I think also is kind of interesting when you raise the subject of NFTs is that, okay, of course, like first of all, in the larger public sphere, we often think of NFTs like in relation to like the booming art market. Mm-hmm. But I think what's also like aligned with like this notion of Black Swan to provide an alternative, like we could also repackage the NFT in this alternative infrastructure. Because I think it's pretty important right now for us to not reduce like a single medium purely to an economic market. And I think that's kind of what you're pushing at anyway. And I think that within that structure of NFTs connected to Black Swan, we already have actually created a DAO structure with an artist called Billy Bluthel, which was connected to Folio, which is also a really interesting NFT gallery platform, which is very kind of locally, or should I say trans-locally ran, with the founding members really being kind of extremely curated about who they're actually putting up the NFTs, and also trying to kind of break the linear concepts of the smart contracts that are applied to NFTs. And through this work, we actually created a multi-sig wallet, which meant that the artist who actually works collaboratively in performance works then worked when they sold the NFT, that those funds went through an already existing legacy contract, which then placed certain percentages to different parts of the collective making process. So this could be another way in which like Black Swan could be linked to the sales distribution through collective making practices of NFTs. And I think also one potential other idea about using NFTs in Black Swan would be, for example, instead of thinking about this like individual sale, like what if a group of artists who were using the Black Swan model decided to put up for sale one NFT personally, but then actually the whole fund would be collectively put together and then pushed through the funding process that was already shown through Cygnet. So that could be like an interesting way of placing funds into the model of Black Swan. So I think that there is like quite a bit of potential around NFTs. And I think that it's also, well, hopefully it will also begin to break.
Excuse me. That sounds really, really. Orb, can you help me out?
I'm here. So we had a question for Ricardo. Are you okay? Are you still with us?
I'm with you. Yeah.
That's good. So yeah, this is for Ricardo. In addition to Midi, have you also experimented with importing and processing raw audio? I guess, yeah, what is your feeling of the difference between generating Midi or generating audio files?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think if you're doing something where the instrument is very specific to the sound, say a piano, the note of the piano really matches the sound, I think you can convert a sound file to a Midi and it should work fine. But if you're doing electronic music or dubstep or something very complex, very often when you translate the audio file into Midi, you eventually have to label it. So say, these Midi files are drums, and then it is possible you can do that, but then you also have to, because Gradient is not synthesizing any sound, so it's only sending Midi information. So in whatever software you're using, you have to basically attach the same instruments to those Midis. But it is possible you can do that.
Have you, I know you did a lot of user testing that led to the creation of this. And I guess I'm curious, and this is a question from Neo JD, what the response from other musicians has been like, or if you found anything from these tests with other musicians. Yeah,
I think what I found, the biggest challenge, which is still a challenge to be solved, is the symbolic language, which in the video we don't get to talk about it so much, but basically these nodes that you drag and drop. So say if you're trying to write something between a drum and a synth, then you would drag a particular node to mark that that relationship. And that's still not really clear, because it was really difficult to do something that worked for everyone. So some people could see the relationship between the icons and what the nodes are doing, but a lot of people just didn't pick up on what they're supposed to do, and it didn't seem that intuitive. So it still requires a lot of learning curve. Still, there's a steep learning curve to learning these nodes. But so yeah, that will be the next step, to really find what amongst different composers, what will be the common nodes that we can begin to use. So say in the first library, then you have 10 nodes that match what most people are using.
That kind of brings up a interesting line of continuation between all of the videos, where the role that language plays is kind of foregrounded in technology, or technology is in service of the social rather than in replacement of the social. And yeah, I'm curious what you all thought of the different approaches to rethinking technology and how it's situated in different social contexts.
Should I jump in? And
do it?
I think that, like, through working with Black Swan, I think I would like to pull on the idea of technology as like enunciation, maybe. Because of course, like, enunciation cannot be language alone, but it's more of this kind of cultural construction that doesn't allow between the usual split of like subject, object, psyche, and environment. And I think that if we begin to think about technology as an enunciation, it also becomes a way of communicating with each other, and like changes this kind of hard line of the human and the machine. And I think that if we really want to begin thinking about technology as like a social evolution, that we also have to bring it onto our bodies.
I love that, Penny. I mean, part of the reason for making these labyrinths was really to give artists an opportunity to be able to discuss the back-end processes, and also to like maybe expedite some of it. I know some of you were in a very prototype stage when we started asking you about these technologies. So what's cool, and Trust and Orb and I have also discussed that in making these R&D labyrinths, there's also been a bit of kind of acceleration of the technology itself. So maybe it'd be great to wrap up to hear from you guys, like, what are the future plans? And also, if people want to try these softwares, are you open to sharing them or them getting in touch with you? Maybe let's start with Ricardo, and then Bryn, and then Penny.
Sure. Yeah. Before, I just want to comment on the question that Orb brought up. I thought it was really, really spot on, the question of language. And I think we're in a moment where we have computer languages that are very difficult to learn, and then you have interfaces that are very simplistic. And I think that there's a lot of space in between for us to rethink language and how we interact with computers and computational processes. And so, yeah, your second question. Gradient right now, I'm looking for collaborators and people that are interested in turning the very buggy prototype that I did in MaximSP in something that is potentially downloadable and usable, because right now it only works on my computer. It needs a lot of dependencies, but looking for collaborators.
Yeah, I think just to echo the thoughts on language, I think there is a large part of me that still actually can't believe how malleable language really is. And so, I mean, it goes back to this question about naming that was asked earlier, which is kind of hard for me, because it's like the second you change the name of something, you change what it is, and then you change the agreement that we believe what it is. And so if we do that throughout our technological understanding, suddenly something that is, I don't know, that could construct a reality that we dislike can construct a reality that we like. And I think this simple shift is quite exciting. And so I think my favorite thing to do sometimes is to watch the way that pronouns shift, and particularly them pronouns in their ubiquity now in the English language. And listen, like I was just listening to the radio, and this woman was talking about someone who was cisgender, but she just naturally said them because that's how she understood people now, because that's how language was. So suddenly gender was being pulled away from this person's body, their cisness aside, and I don't know, I find that really fascinating. Of course, I'm very happy to share the program that my sibling made for me to never deal with writer's block again with everybody. I think it's sick, and it's based on Rita, which is like they did some tweaking, but it's very similar. So it's already available.
Super. And the next plans with Black Swan is that we will actually be running more working groups, and we will also be providing Cygnet eventually when it's got its tweaks ironed out. And yeah, if you want to, because of course right now Black Swan is very locally based in Berlin, but we do hope to be able to open source the model translocally. And then I think Orb might have the link to the newsletter that they can put in the chat.
Let's do that.
Let's do it.
So I think that's what we have time for today. I want to thank our audience for coming along on this very experimental live stream, bugs and all, coughing and all, and also to our wonderful artist guides. Thank you so much for your work on this project with us. Before we say goodnight to everyone, or whatever time zone you're on, goodbye, there are some people I really need to thank. First of all, to my Wider Arts Technologies team, I would like to thank Tamar Clark-Brown, Alexander Boys, Victoria Ivanova, and Kay Watson. And I'd personally like to thank the guys at Trust, Calum Bowden, and Arthur Rowing-Bear. I mean, they have worked tirelessly on this project, and it has been a lot of fun. I also need to thank the wider teams involved, including Laura Lotti, the Black Swan Working Group, Ruth Catlow at Furtherfield, and the Goethe Institute for supporting the Black Swan project. I need to thank AHRC for supporting the Creative AI Lab. And then to the wider creative team who put these videos together, which I should mention will be available on YouTube to watch individually, as well as the whole live stream event. Thank you to GVN908 for being the puppet master of this live stream, to Billy John Boutil, who Penny mentioned earlier, for music, to Joanna Pope for sound design, to Shivani Hassad and Malte Mergans for camera work, to Greg Oki for sound recording, to Malte Zander for 3D design, to Philip Ullman for real-time animation, to Son Pham for logo design, and to Leïth Benkhedda for Cygnet user interface and animation, and to Gaston Ibarroule for sound recording for Ricardo's episode, and finally to Kamille Johnson for their help explaining the D'Artagnan interface over the phone. So that's all from us, and thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, Orb.
Bye.
Bye, Arb.